My son called, "Dad, I'm at the police station. My stepdad beat me and lied to file a report. The cops believe him, not me." I asked, "Which officer?" "Sergeant Miller." I said, "Wait 20 minutes. I didn't hire a lawyer." I walked in uniform. The sergeant looked up and panicked. "Captain, I didn't know," I said. "Give me 15 minutes with his stepdad." He started shaking. "He's all yours the whole night." I never thought a single phone call could freeze my blood solid. But the moment Caleb's voice crackled through the line, telling me he was at the Southside precinct because his stepdad had physically harmed him and filed a false report, my entire world shifted, and I knew exactly what was coming next. The precinct hummed with its usual late afternoon drone, the air thick with stale coffee and the scent of fear. I was staring at incident reports, the afternoon sun cutting through my blinds like prison bars, when Caleb called. My 16-year-old, a sophomore with my build and his mom's dark eyes. He'd been distant lately, typical teenage stuff, or so I thought. But the tremor in his voice, that triggered an instinct that had kept me alive in Anbar province. "Dad," he started, "I'm fine. Just, can we talk?" "Not on the phone." He asked me to meet him at Owen's garage, not home. Owen, my younger brother, the only mechanic in Seattle who could resurrect a '67 Mustang from rust and regret. Caleb practically grew up there. "I'm on my way," I said, grabbing my jacket, telling Lieutenant Marcus Thorne I'd be gone an hour. Marcus, a barrel-chested veteran, just nodded. He knew the look. Owen's garage sat in an industrial wasteland that gentrification somehow forgot. I pulled up and found Caleb perched on the hood of a classic Chevelle, shoulders hunched, staring at his phone. When he looked up, the purple shadow blooming under his left eye, half hidden by carefully arranged hair, hit me like a physical blow. "Don't freak out," he said, sliding off the hood, hands raised. "It's not as bad as it looks." My training kicked in before the rage could consume me. I approached slowly, gently turning his face to the light. The bruise was fresh, maybe 3 or 4 hours old. Faint finger marks were visible on his upper arm, just under his sleeve. "Caleb," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "who did this to you?" His eyes welled up, but he was too proud to let the tears fall. "We got in an argument about the game Saturday," he choked out. I talked back, and he grabbed me, shoved me against the wall, said I was disrespectful, that mom lets me get away with everything, that someone needed to teach me discipline. His voice cracked. I pushed him back, just once, and he lost it. My blood temperature dropped to absolute 0. This was combat calm, the crystalline clarity right before hell breaks loose. "Where's your mother?" I asked. "She was at Sophia's. She doesn't know yet. Dominic told me if I said anything, he'd make sure I never saw you again. Said he has friends in family court, that he could prove you're an unfit parent because you're never around." I pulled Caleb into my arms, felt him shake against my chest. "Did you physically harm him back?" "No, I left, grabbed my bike, and came here." He pulled away, swiping at his eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. I shouldn't have provoked him. I know Mom's happy with him, and I don't want to mess that up." "Stop," I gripped his shoulders, making sure he looked me in the eye. "You did nothing wrong. A grown man put his hands on you. That's assault. That's unacceptable. I'll handle your mother. Right now, I need you to do exactly what I say." We were going to the hospital, getting him checked out, documenting everything. Caleb nodded, and I saw that absolute faith in his eyes, that Dad would fix this. Dad would make it right. It was a weight I'd carried since the day he was born. What I didn't tell him was that Dominic Vega had just made the biggest mistake of his life. There were rules in my world, laws I upheld, codes I lived by. But one rule superseded everything else: you don't touch his son. Meanwhile, Isabel Ramirez stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her sister Sophia's house. She tried to convince herself the tightness in her chest was just anxiety about Caleb's upcoming football game. She'd been on edge all day since the argument at breakfast between Caleb and Dominic. Sophia called through the door, "You okay in there?" "Yeah, just give me a minute." She splashed cold water on her face. At 43, Isabel had aged gracefully. Yoga, expensive skincare, and the comfortable life Dominic provided. She'd married him because he was everything Ethan wasn't: present, attentive, financially stable, without the constant threat of a bullet ending it all. No more 3 a.m. calls about officer-involved shootings. No more waiting up, wondering if today was the day she'd become a widow. But lately, Dominic had been different. Shorter temper, drinking more, working later hours. And his relationship with Caleb had deteriorated from cool to hostile over the past 6 months. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. She almost didn't answer, but guilt and habit made her swipe right. Isabel, where are you? At Sophia's. Why? What's wrong? She heard it immediately. That tone Ethan used when he was barely restraining his fury. When did you last see Caleb? Her heart stopped. This morning, around 7:30. Why, Ethan? What happened? Your husband happened. The way he said husband tasted rotten. Her stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Dominic put his hands on our son. Caleb has bruises, Isabel. On his face, his arms. Do you want to tell me how long this has been going on? The bathroom tilted. That's... No. Dominic wouldn't. Caleb must have gotten in a fight at school. Caleb told me everything. And before you accuse our son of lying, I'm looking at the evidence right now. We're at City General Hospital. You should get here. He hung up. Isabel stared at the phone, her perfect world cracking like a windshield after a stone strike. Dominic had been frustrated with Caleb. Yes, the boy could be difficult, moody, disrespectful. But physical harm? That wasn't the man she'd married. Not the man who brought her coffee in bed every Sunday, who'd renovated their kitchen with his own hands, who'd promised to give her the stability Ethan never could. She burst out of the bathroom. I need to go. It's Caleb. The drive to City General Hospital took 15 minutes that felt like hours. She tried calling Dominic 3 times, straight to voicemail. When she finally reached the emergency room, she found Ethan in the waiting area, still in uniform, radiating a controlled intensity that had once made her feel safe and now just made her feel small. Where is he? Getting x-rays. The doctor wants to rule out a fractured orbital bone. Ethan stood, and she was reminded viscerally how physically imposing he was: 6 feet 2 inches, 200 pounds of coiled muscle, and barely suppressed violence. You want to explain to me how you didn't notice your husband was mistreating our son? Don't. Isabel's voice shook. Don't you dare make this sound like I knew. If Caleb was having problems, he should have told me. He tried 3 weeks ago. Remember when he asked to spend weekdays with me and only weekends at your place? You told him he was being dramatic, that he needed to adjust. She had said that. The memory made her nauseous. Mrs. Ramirez, a nurse, appeared. Your son is ready to see you. Isabel rushed past Ethan, past the judgment in his eyes, and found Caleb in a curtained examination area. The bruise looked worse under the fluorescent lighting, an angry purple spreading from his cheekbone to his eye socket. But it was the defeated slump of his shoulders that broke her heart. Baby mom. Caleb's voice was flat. Dad told you. He told me his version. I want to hear yours. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. I talked back to Dominic about Saturday's game. Said I wanted a dad there, not him. He grabbed my arm, shoved me into the wall, told me I was an ungrateful punk. I pushed him away. He punched me. Caleb finally looked at her. That's my version. You're going to believe me, or are you going to make excuses for him like you always do? Always. Blake, what are you talking about? The shoving, the grabbing, the names he calls me when you're not in the room. The way he goes through my phone, my backpack, controls everything I do. I've been telling you for months that something's wrong, but you don't want to see it. You're so happy to have your perfect husband and your perfect house that you don't care what he does to me. Each word was a knife. Isabel felt tears streaming down her face. Caleb, I swear I didn't know. Yeah, well, now you do. The curtains swept open. Ethan and a doctor entered, followed by Sarah Jenkins, a woman in a blazer with a CPS badge clipped to her belt. The social worker's presence made everything horrifyingly real. Mrs. Ramirez, I'm Sarah Jenkins from Child Protective Services. I need to ask you some questions about your household. The next hour was a blur of interrogation, medical reports, and the slow, agonizing realization that she'd failed her son, failed to see what was happening under her own roof, failed to protect him from a man she'd brought into their lives. When it was over, Caleb was released into Ethan's custody pending an investigation. Temporary, Sarah Jenkins said, but the look Ethan gave her promised this was permanent. Isabel, Ethan stopped her as she walked to her car. You need to decide right now what's more important, your marriage or your son. Because you can't have both anymore. She watched them drive away, Ethan and Caleb in his truck, the boy's head against the window, her ex-husband's hand on their son's shoulder. She felt the foundations of her carefully constructed life crumble to dust. When she finally got home, the house was dark. Dominic's truck was in the driveway. She found him in his study, a glass of bourbon in hand, staring at his phone. "Where's Caleb?" he asked without looking up. "With Ethan, at the hospital, where you put him." He looked at her, and she saw something she'd never seen before. Not remorse, not shame, but cold calculation. "He tell you his version?" "His version." Her voice rose. "You physically harmed our son in the face." "Our son?" Dominic laughed, bitter and sharp. "He's not my son, Isabel. He made that clear today. He's Ethan's son, and he never lets me forget it. I've tried for 2 years to connect with that kid, and all I get is attitude and disrespect. So yeah, I put him in his place. That's what fathers do. You're not his father." The words came out before she could stop them. Something dangerous flickered across Dominic's face. "Yeah, I'm starting to realize that." He drained his bourbon. "Your ex is going to come at me for this, you know that, right? Captain Ethan Carter, war hero, decorated officer. He's going to try to destroy me. Maybe you deserve it." Dominic stood. For the first time in their marriage, Isabel felt afraid. Be very careful whose side you choose here. Because if you think Ethan is going to welcome you back with open arms, you're delusional. You left him, remember? You said he was married to the job, that you couldn't live with the danger, that you deserved better. Well, this is better. This house, this life, I gave you everything you asked for. And if you throw that away over one mistake, over a punk kid who needs discipline, then you're a fool." He walked out, leaving her standing in the study, her perfect life in ruins, wondering how she'd been so blind. "I had Caleb settled in my apartment, a sparse 2-bedroom unit with all the warmth of a barracks, but at least it was safe. My phone rang at 10:03 p.m. An unknown number, but my gut told me to answer. "Carter," I said. "Captain Carter, this is Sergeant O'Connell from the South Side Precinct. I have your son here." My blood froze. Caleb was 20 feet away on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, pretending to watch TV. "What are you talking about?" "My son is right here. Sir, I have a Caleb Carter, 16 years old. Claims you're his father. He was brought in about an hour ago. His stepfather filed a report. Assault, destruction of property. The kid's in interview room B, and he's asking for you." The world slowed. I looked at Caleb on the couch, then back at my phone. "Sergeant O'Connell, I'm going to ask you one time. Describe the boy you have." About 5 feet 11 inches, brown hair, has a bruise on his face. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Nobody talks to my son without me present. Clear?" "Yes, sir." "Captain, I should tell you, the stepfather is here, too. Dominic Vega. He's pretty insistent we press charges." I felt that combat calm descend again, cold and clarifying. "I'll deal with Vega. You just make sure my son is comfortable and has water." 20 minutes. I hung up and turned to Caleb, who was now sitting up, alert. "What's wrong?" "Your stepfather just filed a false police report, claiming you assaulted him. You're at the South Side Precinct." "Apparently." I grabbed my jacket, my badge, my service weapon. "When did you last see Dominic?" "This morning at the house, Dad. I swear I didn't touch him." "I know. He's trying to get ahead of what happened today. Make himself the victim." I checked my weapon automatically, a habit from 2 decades of doing this before every shift. "Get dressed. You're coming with me. I want you visible and accounted for when I walk into that station." "Dad, what are you going to do?" I looked at Caleb, saw the fear there, the uncertainty. He needed to see that his father could handle this, that justice existed, that good men still won sometimes. "I'm going to do what I've always done. Protect what's mine." The drive to Southside Precinct took exactly 18 minutes. I used the time to make 3 calls, one to Marcus Thorne, my second in command, one to Owen, my brother, and one to my lawyer, Eleanor Vance, a shark who'd gotten me through the divorce and owed me several favors. When we walked into the station, I made sure to stop at the front desk, made sure the duty officer logged Caleb's arrival, made sure there were witnesses and timestamps. Then I walked toward the interview rooms with Caleb beside me, my hand on his shoulder, projecting an authority that made officers step aside. Sergeant O'Connell met us in the hallway. He was maybe 30, solid build, career cop written all over him. The moment he saw my uniform, his face went white. "Captain Carter. Which room is my son supposedly in, Sergeant?" "Interview B, sir." But I walked past him, opened the door. Empty. Just an empty room with a table, 2 chairs, and the ghost of a fabricated accusation. Interesting. My son seems to have disappeared. I turned, and O'Connell actually took a step back. "You want to explain to me how you have a victim in custody who's also standing right next to me?" "Sir, I was just following procedure." Vega came in with a report. Said his stepson attacked him, destroyed property at his home, made threats. He had photos. Documentation. Photos of what? Damage he did himself? "Sergeant O'Connell, you've been a cop long enough to recognize a setup. Where's Vega now?" Interrogation C. "He's waiting to give a statement." "Excellent. I'm going to need 15 minutes with him." O'Connell's eyes widened. "Captain, I can't." "You can't what?" I stepped closer, dropped my voice to a register that carried command without volume. "You filed a report based on false information. You attempted to process a minor without parental notification. And you're harboring a man who physically harmed a child, my child, earlier today. Now I can make this official. Bring in internal affairs. Have your career examined under a microscope. Or you can give me 15 minutes with the man who tried to frame my son, and we can resolve this quietly. Your choice, Sergeant." O'Connell looked at Caleb, at the bruise that was now impossible to ignore under the station's harsh lighting, and something shifted in his expression. "He did that this morning. Hospital records are already filed. X-rays, doctor's statement, CPS report, all time-stamped. So when Vega claims my son attacked him today, you can see the problem." "Jesus." O'Connell ran a hand through his hair. "Captain, I didn't know." He came in all professional, had his story straight, seemed credible. "He's a contractor. He's good at building facades." I gentled my tone fractionally. "You're not at fault here, Randy, but you're going to help me fix it. Take Caleb to your office. Get him coffee, something to eat. I need witnesses to see him calm, cooperative, uninjured beyond what Vega did earlier. While I have a conversation with my son's stepfather. Sir, if you..." "I'm not going to end his life." I smiled. It was not a kind expression. "I'm just going to ask him some questions about his construction business, his permits, his tax returns. Completely by the book." O'Connell hesitated, then nodded. "Interview room C. He's all yours." "But, Captain, I didn't hear anything. I was in my office doing paperwork." "Smart man." I waited until Caleb was safely in O'Connell's office, visible through the glass, before I walked to interrogation room C. I didn't knock, just opened the door and stepped inside, letting it close behind me with an authoritative click. Dominic Vega sat at the metal table, looking smug and confident in expensive jeans and a polo shirt that screamed successful contractor. He was maybe 40, fit from manual labor, with slicked back hair and a $1,000 watch. When he saw me, that smug expression flickered. "Captain Carter, I was hoping we could talk man-to-man about your son's behavior." "Shut up." Dominic's mouth snapped closed. I walked slowly around the table, my boots loud on the linoleum. I didn't sit, didn't move into Vega's space, just stood there, letting the silence stretch, letting my uniform and my reputation and my barely leashed rage do the work. "You put your hands on my son," I finally said, my voice conversational. "Then you try to cover it up by filing a false report. That's assault on a minor and filing a false police report. Those are felonies, Dominic. He attacked me. Caleb was with me all evening. Hospital records, witnesses, timestamps. Your story falls apart under basic scrutiny." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of this station, go home, and stay away from my son. I'm filing for emergency custody, and you're not going to contest it. You're going to tell Sergeant O'Connell that there was a misunderstanding, that you overreacted, that you're dropping all charges. Like hell. And if you don't, I continued as if Dominic hadn't spoken, I'm going to take a very close look at your business, your permits, your building codes, your employee documentation. I'm going to talk to the IRS about some interesting discrepancies I've noticed in your tax returns. Yes, I've already pulled them. Perks of being a captain. I'm going to talk to your suppliers about those bulk material purchases that don't quite match your project invoices. And I'm going to make sure every building inspector in this city knows your name. Dominic's face had gone pale. You can't. I can and I will. Because you made one critical error, Dominic. You thought I was just a cop, but I'm not just a cop. I'm a father, and you harmed my son. I pushed off the wall, moved to the door. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Keep pushing this, and I'll destroy everything you've built. Or walk away, and maybe you get to keep your business and your freedom. Your choice. I opened the door, then paused. Oh, and Dominic, if you ever come near Caleb again, I won't use my badge. I'll use my hands. And there won't be enough of you left for a closed casket. We clear. I walked out without waiting for an answer. I found O'Connell in his office with Caleb, who was nursing a hot chocolate and looking young and vulnerable in a way that tightened my chest. Sergeant O'Connell, Mr. Vega is ready to give a statement. I believe he'll be dropping all charges and apologizing for wasting police resources. O'Connell looked between me and the interrogation room, then nodded slowly. I'll go take care of that. When we were alone, Caleb looked up at me. What did you say to him? The truth. That he messed with the wrong family. I pulled him into a hug, felt him cling to me like he had when he was 5 years old and afraid of thunderstorms. It's over, champ. You're safe now. But even as I said it, even as Caleb relaxed against me, I knew it wasn't over. Not really. Because men like Dominic Vega didn't give up that easily. And wounds this deep took more than threats to heal. This was just the beginning. 3 days after the police station incident, I sat in my office reviewing surveillance footage from one of Dominic Vega's construction sites. My brother, Owen, had a friend of a friend who worked security, and that footage had found its way into my hands. What I was seeing made my blood run cold for entirely different reasons. Captain Marcus Thorne knocked and entered without waiting. We got a problem. Another one. Isabel just called the front desk. She's here. Says she needs to talk to you and she won't leave. I closed the laptop. I'd been avoiding my ex-wife since the hospital. Let her stew in the consequences of her choices. Let her wonder what I was planning. But maybe it was time for that conversation. I found Isabel in the lobby, and the sight of her stopped me cold. She'd lost weight in 3 days, had circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, and was wearing yoga pants and a sweatshirt instead of her usual carefully curated outfit. Ethan, her voice cracked. Please, I need to talk to you. I gestured to a conference room, waited until we were alone. What do you want, Isabel? I want my son back. Tears streamed down her face. I want to explain, to apologize. You want? What about what Caleb wants? Did you ask him? He won't answer my calls. Won't respond to texts. I went to your apartment, and he wouldn't even come to the door. Yeah, that's what happens when you choose your husband over your child. I didn't choose. She stopped, took a breath. Okay, I did. I chose wrong. I was blind and stupid, and I failed him. But Ethan, he's my son too. I have rights. Rights? You nearly forfeited them when your husband put him in the hospital. I kept my voice level professional. CPS is still investigating. Emergency custody is temporary, but I'm filing for permanent modification. Caleb doesn't feel safe in that house, and I'm not sending him back. What if I leave Dominic? The question hung in the air. I studied my ex-wife, looking for manipulation, for strategy. I found only desperation. Have you? I'm not yet, but I'm thinking about it. The house is in both our names. The business is his. But I could. Thinking about it? I laughed, bitter. You're thinking about leaving the man who physically harmed your son? That's where we are. It's not that simple. We're married. We have assets together. I can't just walk away from 2 years of my life. Caleb is 16 years of your life, and you're still hesitating. I stood. I'm going to make this simple for you, Isabel. You want to be in Caleb's life? You want him to answer your calls? Then you prove you've changed. You leave Vega. You get therapy. You spend every day earning back the trust you destroyed. But until then, until I see actual change, and not just words, you stay away from him. Because he's been through enough. You can't keep me from my son. Watch me. I walked out, left her sitting there, and felt no satisfaction in her pain. Just a bone-deep weariness at how tangled everything had become. Back in my office, I opened the laptop again. The surveillance footage showed something interesting. Dominic Vega meeting with 3 men in hard hats at a construction site in the Northwood district. The same site where, according to permits, no construction was supposed to be happening for another 2 weeks. The same site where, according to my digging, building inspections had been mysteriously passed despite obvious code violations. My phone rang. Eleanor Vance, my lawyer. Ethan, we have a problem. Vega is countersuing for defamation and harassment. Claims you threatened him at the police station, that you're abusing your position to intimidate him, and he's filing an ethics complaint with the department. He's what? It gets worse. He's claiming Caleb has been violent at home for months, that you've been coaching the boy to lie, and that the whole thing is a custody play on your part. He's got documentation, texts, photos, witness statements from neighbors. I settled in my gut. He's been planning this since before he harmed Caleb. Probably. This guy's smart, Ethan. He knew you'd come after him, so he built a defense ahead of time. We need to be very, very careful here. After she hung up, I sat in the dark of my office and realized I'd underestimated Dominic Vega. The man wasn't just someone covering his tracks. He was a predator who'd been orchestrating this entire scenario. Maybe from the beginning. The question was why. That night, after Caleb was asleep, I called in a favor from an old army buddy, who now worked private investigation. Within an hour, I had a preliminary background on Dominic Vega that made everything click into place. 3 previous marriages, 2 restraining orders, both sealed, a bankruptcy 7 years ago right before he started his construction business, and a sealed juvenile record from when Vega was 17. Juvenile records stayed sealed for good reasons, but I also knew people who could unseal them off the books, no questions asked. It would cost me, maybe even cost me my badge if it came out, but my son was more important than my career. I made the call. The file arrived via encrypted email at 2:47 a.m. I was still awake, had been for hours, digging through public records and construction permits, trying to find a thread that would unravel Dominic Vega's carefully constructed life. What I found in that sealed juvenile file made me reach for my phone to call Isabel, then stop. Because what I was reading wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon, and I needed to think very carefully about how to use it. At 17, Dominic Vega, then Dominic Garcia, had been arrested for assault against his stepfather. The charges were eventually dropped, the record sealed, but the police reports told a story. A teenage boy with anger management issues, a pattern of violence, allegations of stalking his stepfather's daughter from a previous marriage. The daughter had been 15 at the time. I felt sick. I looked at the closed door to Caleb's room and wondered how I'd failed to see this coming. Isabel had married a predator, and I had been too busy being angry about the divorce to properly vet the man who'd be living with my son. My phone buzzed. Owen, you awake? Yeah. What's up? You need to come to the garage now. Caleb's here. What? He's supposed to be asleep in his room. Well, he's not. He rode his bike here an hour ago. Won't tell me why, but he's pretty shaken up. You need to come. I checked Caleb's room. Empty bed stuffed with pillows, a classic teenager trick. I was out the door in 3 minutes, my heart pounding. What if Vega had gotten to him? I found Caleb in Owen's office, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like motor oil and old coffee. My brother stood guard at the door, arms crossed, looking worried. Caleb, I knelt in front of my son. What happened? I went back to the house to get some stuff I forgot. Caleb wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom wasn't there, but Dominic was. Dad, he was waiting for me. I felt my control slip. Did he touch you? No, he just talked. Said things about you, about how you're going to lose your job because of the ethics complaint. How you're abusing your authority, how the court's going to see through your manipulation and give mom full custody. He said I'd never see you again, that I should get used to having him as a father, that you were nothing but a violent thug in a uniform. He was baiting you, trying to get you to attack him. I know that's why I left. But Dad, Caleb finally looked up, and the fear in his eyes was worse than any bruise. He showed me photos of me sleeping in my room, taken through the window. He's been watching me. The world tilted. I stood, walked to the corner of the garage, and had to physically restrain myself from putting my fist through the wall. Owen put a hand on my shoulder. Ethan, stay smart. Don't give him what he wants. He violated a restraining order. My voice was deadly calm. He threatened a minor. He's been stalking my son. And if you go over there and beat the hell out of him, you lose everything. Your badge, custody, maybe your freedom. Is that what Caleb needs? I looked at my son, huddled in that blanket, trying to be brave and failing. Owen was right. This required strategy, not violence. Caleb, did he give you those photos? No. Just showed them on his phone. There were like 20 of them from the past week. Good. That means they're still on his phone, time-stamped and geotagged. I pulled out my own phone. I'm calling this in. Official channels. He just gave us everything we need. 2 hours later, Officer Maya Cruz and another patrolman arrived at Dominic Vega's house with a warrant for his phone based on stalking charges filed by me on behalf of my minor son. Isabel wasn't home, working late at her sister's, according to neighbors. Dominic answered the door in pajamas, all innocent confusion, but his phone told a different story. 23 photos of Caleb taken over 5 days, locations, timestamps, angles that showed Vega had been following the boy, watching him, building a file. And in the metadata, my investigator found something else. Photos of other teenage boys going back years. Captain Carter, Maya Cruz called me aside. You need to see this. Vega isn't just stalking Caleb. We found 3 other victims on his phone. One's from his previous marriage, another's a neighbor's kid. The third, we don't know yet, but this is a pattern. I felt vindication and horror war in my chest. Enough for an arrest? More than enough. Stalking, harassment, child endangerment. We can hold him for 72 hours while we build the case. You want to be here when we pick him up? No. I looked at Caleb, asleep on Owen's office couch, exhausted from fear and adrenaline. I want to be with my son. But Maya, make sure he knows why he's going down. Make sure he knows he should have left my family alone. The arrest happened at 7:15 a.m. while Dominic Vega was drinking coffee and probably planning his next move against me. Isabel got the call at 7:47 from a lawyer Dominic had on retainer. By 8 o'clock, she was at my apartment, pounding on the door. Ethan, open up. What did you do? I opened the door, stepped into the hallway so Caleb wouldn't hear. I did my job. Your husband is a predator. He's been stalking Caleb, photographing him, and we found evidence he's done this before. He's in custody, and if I'm right, he's looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. Isabel's face crumbled. This isn't happening. This can't be. It is. And Isabel, you need to make a choice right now. You can stand by Vega. Hire lawyers. Fight this. But you can't do both. She slid down the wall, sat in the hallway of my apartment building, and sobbed. I didn't know. I swear to God, Ethan, I didn't know. I believe you. But Caleb doesn't, and that's what matters. I softened fractionally. You want to fix this? You start by telling the prosecutors everything. Every red flag you ignored. Every moment you chose Vega over Caleb. You give them ammunition to put him away for good. That's how you start earning your son back. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I felt no satisfaction, just a grim determination to see this through. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. Men like Vega had contingency plans, had resources, had lawyers who knew how to muddy water and create reasonable doubt. The arrest was just the beginning. The real war was about to start. Dominic Vega made bail in 48 hours. His lawyer, Victor Sterling, a slick operator who specialized in defending the indefensible, argued that the photos were innocent, that Vega was concerned about his stepson's whereabouts, that the metadata was circumstantial. The judge, a tired woman 3 weeks from retirement, set bail at $50,000 and released him with an ankle monitor and a restraining order. I got the call from the prosecutor, Rebecca Hayes, a bulldog who'd put away more predators than anyone in the city. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I pushed for no bail, but Sterling's good. He made Vega look like a concerned parent. He'll run. His passport's flagged. He's got a monitor, and we're building the case. The other victims are willing to testify. That'll take months, maybe years. In the meantime, he's out there and he knows I'm coming for him. Ethan." Rebecca's voice held a warning. "Do not do anything stupid. We have him. Let the system work." But I had spent 23 years watching the system work. And I knew its flaws intimately. I knew how evidence got suppressed, how victims got intimidated, how men with money and good lawyers walked free while good people suffered. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not to Caleb. Captain Marcus Thorne appeared in my office doorway. "We have a situation." Anonymous tip came in about Vega's construction sites. Claims he's been using undocumented workers, ignoring safety codes, paying off inspectors. Could be nothing. Or it could be exactly what we need. I grabbed my jacket. "Give me a warrant for his business records. Everything. Payroll, permits, inspection reports. I want to bury him under so many charges, he never sees daylight again." "Lou, man, you need to be careful. His lawyer's already crying harassment. IA is watching you. Then they can watch me do my job." I headed for the door, then stopped. "Marcus, you've been my partner for 15 years. You don't have to follow me on this. If it goes bad, I don't want you caught in the fallout." Marcus stood, grabbed his own jacket. "That kid of yours used to bring his science projects to the precinct. Showed me how to build a volcano when he was 8. You think I'm going to let some predator walk free? I'm with you. Wherever this goes." The warrant came through by noon. By 2 p.m., I had a team of officers at Vega's main construction site, the luxury condo development in the Northwood district that had been fast-tracked through every permit process, every inspection, every bureaucratic hurdle. What we found was worse than I had hoped for. Structurally unsound foundations, electrical work that violated a dozen safety codes, materials that didn't match the building plans. And in the site office, a set of books that showed Vega had been cooking numbers for years, overbilling clients, underpaying workers, skimming materials, and pocketing the difference. Captain Carter, one of the officers, called from the basement level. "You need to see this." I climbed down into the foundation area, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The officer pointed to a section of wall where concrete had been poured but hadn't yet set properly. "Look at the rebar placement. It's all wrong. This whole building could collapse in a moderate earthquake." And according to the inspection reports, this passed structural review 3 weeks ago. I photographed everything, called in a city building inspector who wasn't on Vega's payroll, and by 4 p.m. had enough evidence to shut down every project Vega had in progress. Financial fraud, reckless endangerment, bribery of public officials. The charges would multiply like bacteria in a petri dish. But still wasn't enough. Because Vega had contingency. Plans, offshore accounts, properties in his mother's name. He could walk away from the business, declare bankruptcy, and disappear into a comfortable life somewhere warm. While Caleb lived with nightmares. I needed something bigger. Something permanent. That night, I met with Owen and Eleanor Vance, my lawyer, in Owen's garage. Caleb was at a friend's house, a carefully supervised visit that I'd arranged to give the kids some normalcy. "Okay," Eleanor spread files across Owen's desk. "Here's where we stand legally. The stalking charges are solid. The construction fraud is building. But Sterling is good and Vega has money. He could drag this out for years, and there's always the chance he beats some charges, plea bargains on others, serves minimal time." "That's not acceptable," I said flatly. "Then we need to think outside the law." Owen leaned back in his chair. "I'm not saying we do anything illegal. I'm saying we need to get creative. What do you have in mind?" Owen grinned. And I was reminded that my younger brother hadn't always made his living fixing cars. Before he'd gone straight, Owen had run with a rougher crowd, had connections that spanned the gray areas between legal and criminal. Vega has enemies, lots of them. Contractors he undercut, workers he screwed over, clients he defrauded. What if some of those enemies decided to come forward? What if the press got interested in the story? A predator contractor who stalked his stepson while building death traps that could collapse on families. Media pressure, Eleanor said slowly. Public outcry. Make it politically impossible for any DA to offer a plea deal. And more than that, Owen pulled up something on his laptop. Vega owns 3 properties outright. One's the house where he lives with Isabel. The other 2 are rental properties that generate his cash flow. What if those properties suddenly had very expensive problems? Plumbing disasters, electrical fires, foundation issues that require immediate and costly repairs. That's destruction of property, I said. Is it? Owen raised an eyebrow. Or is it just the natural consequence of shoddy construction finally catching up with him? You've seen his work. Those properties are probably already disasters waiting to happen. What if someone just accelerated the timeline? I looked at my brother, at the lawyer who was carefully not expressing an opinion, and felt the weight of the choice in front of me. I could play by the rules, trust the system, hope that justice prevailed. Or I could fight fire with fire, use Vega's own weapons against him. How soon can you make it happen? Give me a week. And Ethan, once we start this, we can't stop. Vega will know it's us. He'll fight back. This could get ugly. It's already ugly. Let's finish it. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning when the city's largest newspaper ran a front-page story. Contractor faces stalking, fraud charges. Are your homes safe? The article detailed Dominic Vega's arrest, the photos of Caleb, and crucially included interviews with 3 former employees who described systematic safety violations, financial fraud, and a pattern of intimidation. By noon, Vega's phone was ringing off the hook. Clients demanding refunds, investors pulling funding, city councilors calling for investigations. His carefully constructed empire was shaking. The second domino fell that night when a pipe burst in his primary rental property, a 6-unit building that housed 2 families with young children. The water damage was catastrophic, requiring immediate evacuation and tens of thousands in repairs. The building inspector who showed up found so many code violations that he red-tagged the entire structure. I watched from across the street as tenants carried their belongings out in garbage bags, their faces exhausted and angry. I felt a flicker of guilt for their displacement, but Owen had already arranged for them to be contacted by a tenants' rights lawyer who would help them sue Vega for uninhabitable conditions. They'd end up better off. The third domino was Isabel. 3 days after the newspaper article, she filed for divorce and moved into her sister's house. She called me that night, her voice small and broken. I gave the prosecutor everything, every document I could find, every conversation I remembered. Rebecca Hayes says it's enough to add financial fraud to the stalking charges. That must have been hard. Not as hard as facing Caleb and knowing I chose that monster over my own son. She paused. Can I see him? Just for coffee. I know I don't deserve it, but... I told her I'd ask him. No promises. Caleb agreed reluctantly, and I drove him to a coffee shop where Isabel waited, looking fragile and older than her years. I stayed within sight but out of earshot, letting them talk, watching my son's body language shift from defensive to guardedly open over the course of an hour. When they were done, Caleb walked back to the car with red-rimmed eyes, but looser shoulders. She apologized. Really apologized. Said she was wrong. That she chose badly. That she understands if I never forgive her. Do you want to forgive her? I don't know. Maybe eventually. But Dad, she gave the prosecutor everything. She's helping take Dominic down. I know. Is that enough? To make up for it? I pulled my son into a hug. That's not for me to decide, but it's a start. The fourth domino fell when one of Dominic Vega's previous victims, a boy now 23, married with a child of his own, saw the newspaper article and came forward. His testimony was devastating. 3 years of stalking when he was 15, escalating from photographs to following him to showing up at his school to explicit messages. The charges had been sealed in a plea deal, but now he was willing to testify publicly. 2 more victims followed. The case was no longer just about Caleb. It was about a pattern of predatory behavior spanning a decade. Victor Sterling, Vega's lawyer, tried to suppress the testimony, tried to argue prejudice, character assassination, irrelevance. But Rebecca Hayes was relentless, and the judge, newly motivated by public pressure and media scrutiny, denied every motion. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out. Vega would stand trial for stalking, fraud, child endangerment, and a dozen related charges. If convicted on all counts, he was looking at 15 to 20 years. But I knew convicted men still had appeals, still had lawyers, still had ways to fight back. I needed Vega not just in prison, but destroyed, so thoroughly ruined that he'd never threaten Caleb again. That's when Owen called with the final piece. "Lou, you need to hear this. I have a friend who worked on Vega's construction crew 5 years ago. He's willing to testify that Vega intentionally cut corners on a residential build in 2020. The foundation was never properly reinforced, and Vega knew it. The family that bought that house, their 10-year-old daughter was injured when part of the deck collapsed last year. Does the family know Vega was responsible? Not yet, but they could, if someone pointed them in the right direction. I felt the trap closing. Give me the family's contact information. And Owen, thank you. He's our kid, our family. I'd burn the world down for you, too." Owen's voice was fierce. "Now go finish this." The trial of Dominic Vega began on a cold Monday in November. The courtroom was packed, media, victims, former employees, and every cop in the city who had a grudge against predators who mistreated others. I sat in the front row, Caleb on one side, Isabel on the other, a united front despite all the history between us. Rebecca Hayes's opening statement was surgical. She outlined the pattern of stalking, the photos of Caleb, the testimony from previous victims. She detailed the construction fraud, the building code violations, the bribery. And then she played her final card, the family of the injured girl suing Vega in civil court and willing to testify about the collapsed deck, the negligent construction, the permanent injury their daughter sustained. Victor Sterling tried to counter, painting Vega as a misunderstood businessman, a concerned stepfather, a victim of a vengeful ex-husband with a badge. But his voice lacked conviction, and the jury, 8 women, 4 men, mostly middle-aged, mostly parents, stared at Vega with undisguised contempt. The prosecution's case took 3 days. Victim after victim testified to Vega's stalking, his manipulation, his predatory behavior. Construction workers detailed the fraud, the corner cutting, the intimidation. Building inspectors admitted to taking bribes. The father of the injured girl broke down on the stand, describing his daughter's months of physical therapy, the surgeries, the trauma. Through it all, Vega sat impassive, his expensive suit and calm demeanor a mask over whatever darkness lived beneath. But I saw the cracks, the way his hand shook when the photos of Caleb were displayed, the tightness around his eyes when former employees detailed his cruelty, the moment of pure rage when Isabel took the stand and methodically destroyed his character. On the 4th day, Victor Sterling called Vega to testify in his own defense. It was a gamble, and I knew why. Vega was charismatic, articulate, and Sterling was hoping he could charm the jury. But Rebecca Hayes was waiting. She let Vega tell his story, the concerned stepfather, the misunderstood businessman, the victim of a vindictive ex-husband. She let him paint himself as sympathetic, reasonable. And then she went for the throat. "Mr. Vega, you claimed these photos of Caleb Carter were taken out of concern for his safety. Is that correct?" "Yes. He was sneaking out at night, hanging around dangerous areas." These dangerous areas, Rebecca pulled up a map on the courtroom screen. "Could you identify them?" Vega pointed to various locations: the coffee shop near my apartment, the library, his uncle's garage, Owen's place of business. "These don't seem particularly dangerous to me, Mr. Vega. Would you characterize a library as a dangerous area?" "It's not about the location. It's about who he was meeting." "Who was he meeting?" "I don't know. That's why I was monitoring him." So, you were monitoring a minor child, not your biological son, without his knowledge or consent, because you were concerned about hypothetical meetings with hypothetical people in public locations like libraries and coffee shops? The jury shifted. Vega's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Rebecca continued, "Mr. Vega, let's talk about your previous marriages. How many times have you been married?" 3 times, including Isabel. "And in your previous 2 marriages, did you have stepchildren?" Vega's eyes narrowed. "Yes. Both teenage boys." "Yes. And both relationships ended with restraining orders filed against you. Is that correct?" "Those were misunderstandings." Misunderstandings. Like the photos of Caleb were misunderstandings. Like the building code violations were misunderstandings. Like the collapsed deck that injured a 10-year-old girl was a misunderstanding. Rebecca's voice rose. "Mr. Vega, how many misunderstandings does it take before we recognize a pattern of dangerous, predatory behavior?" Victor Sterling was on his feet, objecting loudly. But the jury had already made up their minds. I could see it in their faces, the disgust, the anger, the determination to protect their own children from men like Dominic Vega. The defense rested the next day, their case in tatters. Closing arguments were brief. Rebecca Hayes methodical and devastating, Victor Sterling desperate and unconvincing. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous on all 23 counts. Guilty. Dominic Vega's face went white. He turned to look at me, and in that moment, I saw everything. The rage, the hatred, the unspoken promise of revenge. But it was hollow, because Vega was going to prison for 15 to 20 years minimum. And by the time he got out, Caleb would be in his 30s, established and safe, and I would still be waiting. Sentencing was set for 2 weeks later. I walked out of the courtroom with Caleb and Isabel, feeling the weight of months of tension finally lifting. Outside, media swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. "Captain Carter, how do you feel about the verdict?" "I feel like justice was served, and I hope this sends a message to anyone who thinks they can harm children and get away with it." I put my arm around Caleb. "My son is safe. That's all that matters." But as we walked to his truck, my phone buzzed. "Owen. Lou, we have a problem. Vega posted bail pending sentencing. He's out." "He's what?" "Might have pulled some strings. Appeals court overturned the remand order. Vega walked out 20 minutes ago. And Lou, his ankle monitor is already offline. He cut it and ran." I looked at Caleb, at Isabel, at the life they'd been trying to rebuild, and felt cold certainty settle in my chest. Vega wasn't going to go quietly. He was going to come after them. One last desperate act of vengeance. Get Caleb somewhere safe. Now. I was already moving toward his truck. "Owen, I need you to take him and Isabel to the cabin upstate. Don't tell me where exactly. Just go." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done from the beginning. I'm going to end this. I had hunted men before. In Mosul, in Kirkuk, in the dark streets of the city's worst neighborhoods. I knew how predators thought, how they moved, where they ran when cornered. And I knew Dominic Vega would come for me first. Not Caleb, not Isabel, but me myself. Because Vega understood that to truly hurt me, you didn't end my life. You ended the lives of what I loved while I watched. Which is why I went home alone. Sent Caleb and Isabel away with Owen and waited. My apartment was dark when I arrived at 10 p.m. I didn't turn on the lights, just moved through the familiar space, checking windows, setting up sight lines, preparing for war. My service weapon was locked in the safe per department regulations. The shotgun I bought for home defense was not. I sat in the dark and waited. Vega came. At 2:17 a.m., I heard the lockpicks working on my door, heard the careful footsteps in the hallway, watched as he slipped inside, a shadow against shadows, holding something that glinted in the ambient light. A knife, of course. Up close and personal. Maximum suffering. "I know you're here, Captain." Vega's voice was steady, almost conversational. "I know Caleb isn't. You sent him away. Smart. But that just means we get to have our conversation uninterrupted." I stayed silent, watching from my position in the bedroom doorway. "You destroyed my life. Vega moved into the living room. My business, my marriage, my freedom. All because your son couldn't handle a little discipline. All because you couldn't accept that Isabel chose me over you. You stalked and mistreated a child. My voice came from the darkness. This was always going to end one way, Dominic. Vega spun toward the sound. But I was already moving. 23 years of training. 3 combat tours. 1,000 encounters with violent offenders. I closed the distance before Vega could react, swept the knife arm aside, drove my shoulder into his sternum. We went down hard, the knife skittering across the floor. I'm going to end your life. Vega gasped, swinging wildly. And then I'm going to find Caleb and your brother and everyone you love. No. I pinned him, drove a knee into his solar plexus. You're not. I could end his life right now. Claim self-defense. Plant the knife. Call it in. No one would question Captain Ethan Carter defending himself against a convicted felon who'd broken into his home. It would be justified, clean, final. But that wasn't justice. That was revenge. And Caleb didn't need a father who was a killer. He needed a father who was better than that. I pulled out my phone, called it in. This is Captain Carter. I have an intruder at my residence. Armed with a knife. I've subdued him. Send units to my location. Vega laughed, blood on his teeth. You think this is over? I'll get a lawyer. I'll claim you lured me here, that you attacked me. Self-defense. Entrapment. Maybe. Or maybe the security camera I installed last week caught everything. I pointed to the small device mounted above the door, including you breaking in, including the knife, including your threats against my son. Vega's face went slack. You planned this? No. I just knew you were stupid enough to come after me, and I was ready. The police arrived 6 minutes later. Maya Cruz first through the door, weapon drawn, eyes taking in the scene, me standing, Vega on the ground, the knife as evidence. Everything clean and legal and by the book. Captain, you okay? I'm fine. Mr. Vega is under arrest for breaking and entering, attempted assault, and violation of his bail conditions. I have video evidence. I handed over my phone. Book him, and make sure his lawyer knows that this time there's no bail. He's in custody until sentencing, and probably for a long time after. They cuffed Vega, read him his rights, hauled him out of the apartment. Victor Sterling arrived 30 minutes later, looked at the evidence, and promptly advised his client to accept whatever plea deal the DA offered, because going to trial with video evidence of a midnight knife attack on a police captain was career suicide, even for a lawyer as good as Sterling. 2 days later, Dominic Vega pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a consolidated sentence, 25 years, no possibility of parole before 18. By the time he got out, if he survived prison that long, he'd be 68 years old, broken and irrelevant. I brought Caleb back home that weekend. We sat on the couch in the apartment, eating pizza and watching a game. Just being father and son in the quiet safety of our own space. Is it really over? Caleb asked. Yeah, it's over. What if he gets out early? What if then I'll be there? I'll always be there. I pulled my son close. That's my promise to you, champ. Whatever happens, wherever you go, I'm on your side, always. Caleb nodded against my shoulder, and I felt something shift. The last piece of tension releasing, the trauma finally beginning to heal. 3 months later, Isabel moved into an apartment 2 blocks away. She and Caleb were rebuilding their relationship slowly, with therapy and honest conversations and the acceptance that trust once broken took years to repair. But they were trying. That was enough. 6 months later, Caleb's bruises had faded completely. He made varsity football, started dating a girl from his chemistry class, and began talking about college. The nightmares came less frequently. The fear in his eyes was gone. 1 year later, I stood in front of the department at an award ceremony, receiving a commendation for my work on the Vega case. The mayor gave a speech about protecting children and upholding justice. The new chief of police praised my dedication and integrity. And in the audience, Caleb sat next to Owen and Isabel, all of them together despite everything. Because family, real family, survived worse than divorce and mistreatment and near tragedy. After the ceremony, Caleb found me outside the precinct. Dad, I'm proud of you. I felt my throat tighten. I'm proud of you too, champ. Every day, I know things got ugly. I know you had to do things that weren't easy, but you protected me. You did the right thing. That's what fathers do. Caleb hugged me, and I held my son and looked up at the clear sky and felt, for the first time in a year, like everything was going to be okay. Because Dominic Vega was behind bars, Caleb was safe. The family was healing, and justice, real, hard-won, imperfect justice, had prevailed. Not because I had been the strongest or the most ruthless, but because I'd been smart enough to use the law, patient enough to build a case, and willing to sacrifice my own desire for immediate revenge in favor of lasting victory. I'd won not by becoming a monster, but by remaining a man, flawed, determined, and absolutely unwilling to let evil win. And in the end, that was enough. What would you have done if it was your family?